Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. My name is Dr. Stephen Kirch, and I'm the creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and building business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Today, my guest is Ann Bennett of Ann Bennett Marketing and Renegade Branding. And today, we'll be talking about how to stand out with a disruptive brand. Welcome, Ann.
Hey, thanks, Steve, for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, so all the listeners of my show know that the first thing that I ask every guest is, what's your story? How did you get to be who you are and a renegade brander? So
I
tell
love
us.
that. What's your story? Well, I'm of the belief that we all come into the world with certain already innate characteristics and patterns and personality styles. And I certainly am a disruptor. I've always been a disruptor. My background is I'm a fine art painter, and I lived in New York City 25 years. I worked for Vogue magazine with no fashion in my portfolio.
Ah,
And the first woman in the art department of Popular Mechanics. But I think, as a kid, I was always the one that my dad was always saying stuff like, "You think you should have everything the way you want it." And I was like, "Yeah, what's wrong with that?" So I've kind of lived my life that way. I'm unstoppable, tenacious, and I have a lot of rebel energy. And when I do the things that I do for my clients, which is help them write different head whipping hooks or introductions or signature talks or create products and programs that align with their personality styles, we just get crazy creative and make everything extremely unique so they can really be different in the marketplace and disrupt.
well, that sounds like a lot of fun.
It is fun. It's totally fun. I'm going to be giving you got your listeners and you the Renegade brand archetype quiz later on, so they can take that and really discover for themselves.
Great. So, um, what are the biggest misconceptions? Because the renegade branding. Um, what are the biggest misconceptions about what branding is anyway?
I think that people think branding is a logo, a tagline, and a color palette. Essentially, they think of branding as the visual aspect of it. There's a verbal aspect, a visual aspect, and then there's the essence of who you actually are. So, like when you think about Apple, Steve Jobs, you know, that Apple's probably the largest computer company in the world, even beyond Samsung, in terms of the amount of money they make. And it was all based on Steve's personality, on what he loved and what he didn't like. And the whole Apple genre was created out of the whole idea of think different. And it was for creative people to really be as large as the corporations. So that came out of really, I think of Steve as an innovator in his personality style. And and it just replicates that. People think that branding is about, oh, a beautiful picture of myself or pretty colors or an interesting tagline, but it is that, but it's so much more. So when I work with my clients, we really dive into that one percentile, the thing that really makes you uniquely interesting and different.
Huh. Yeah. So how do you go about finding that?
I know. People ask, that's why they come to me, right? They ask me
Okay.
that all the time. How do you do that? Right? I'm like, well, if we had been taught how to do this, we would have done it, right? And the truth is you can't really see your own eyebrows. So even if you think you know which archetype you are or who you are. There's nuances to everything, right? But so for me, I created these simple archetypes so people could understand instantly how people perceive them and who they really are in the world. So I have these 4 archetypes. You're either a nurturer, disruptor, innovator, or a geek, and they have specific characteristics. So it's not that we're not everything, which we are as a multifaceted human being, but we also want to simplify everything. Our brain is constantly filtering and
Sure.
labeling, right?
Yeah.
Filtering and labeling. So when you can get really clear about your archetype, it becomes a lot simpler to create a brand and create messaging and visuals that support this idea. So if you were a nurturer, Steve, which I'm not sure, but I'm taking some wild guesses. If you're a nurturer, I use Oprah as like an iconic figure that everybody knows. She's loving, she listens, she's like the girl next door. Everyone feels like they've been to her house for breakfast, that kind of familiarity. She's the kind of person, or if you're a nurturer, you're the type of person that when you walk into a room, people feel like, haven't we met before? Don't I know you? Or they want to hug you, or you're giving out the hugs, that kind of thing. That's the nurturing personality. And then the disruptor, I use Madonna, probably because I was one of the people who saw her first play out in New York City in the 80s. And, she ushered in this whole kind of having a point of view, being really sassy, bold, brassy, that kind of thing. So if you're that type of person, you're definitely a disruptor. The innovator, I use Steve Jobs, very understated, got up on stage with tennis shoes and a pair of jeans and a black t-shirt. And the whole audience was hush. They couldn't wait to hear what Steve was going to pull out of his pocket and show them. Or you're a geek, which I like to use Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because she was so good at what she did. She was on the, Supreme Court justice, probably the only one with a brand. They made a documentary about her and they called it The Notorious RGB.
Yeah. Have a brand that's your initials, and that says something, doesn't
right?
it? Yeah.
But when you know these archetypes, you can really start to dial in what do you want to say, how you want to say it. Because if you're a disruptor, you're going to say it differently than someone who's a nurturer. That's going to be very loving. Or an innovator is going to be really blowing your mind with futuristic types of ideas or doing things, in a very different way than other people. I know we're mentioning the new goggles from Apple. It's crazy, man, all the innovation and stuff that they're doing.
Yeah. So a couple of questions, right? I mean, I see pieces of myself in all 4 of those different archetypes, right? I like to think of myself as good at what I do, pretty intellectual. You don't get a PhD in physics unless you're,
pretty geeky, Steve.
Yeah, it's pretty geeky, but I'm also very often the first person to give someone else a hug, right? So I, there's the nurture thing. I innovate. I've created things. I don't know, disruptor. Well, my mom probably said I was, but
right. She could not control you, right? She's like, what is he up to?
So talk about your quiz a little bit, and we can obviously we can tell people where to go to
take it,
get
to
it,
figure it out.
But how does it distinguish? I mean, is it say, you're 75% this, or is it just give you one, or what do those results look like?
That's a really great question. It's done with data. So Very simple. I don't know math as well as you probably do, Steve. Math is like, I got to algebra. That was about it, guys.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then I was like, I'm much more of a geometry kind of girl. It's very tangible to me. So it's a very simple quiz. It's 9 questions. Don't overthink. It'll take you 2-3 minutes to actually do. But it's a series of questions, and you choose A, B, C, or D as your answer. So it's a very simple way of looking at things. You're an expert at what you do. You're really great at what you do. And I'm the same way. And we could go on forever discussing these things. But for most people, we want things as simple as possible so that we can latch onto it and understand it. And it's true. We have all these aspects. Like, you have probably a little bit of each one, but there's going to be one that's going to pop out. They're going to be more times you're going to be answering in a particular way, and that's going to reveal which archetype you're strongest in. When I work with people and they talk to me after they take the quiz, we look at it. So there's a lot of little nuances in there, right? Like, you could be a nurturing innovator. Kind of depends. Innovators usually are people that are not so nurturing, just so you know. They usually want to go quick. They have a team that's like implementing their big vision, and they're running like a wild, off into the future, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes there's just a few questions that I can ask people after they take the quiz to really dial in those little nuances, right? I do have a lot of people that are nurturing disruptors. They have a part of their personality is extremely nurturing, and the other part is like, yeah, let me tell you how to do that. It's a little more opinionated, that you might fall there. So it really depends.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to take the quiz and find out.
You got to take the quiz. I've given it to over 500 people, and they're all like, oh my God, how did you know?
Yeah.
How did you know?
So while we're on it, where do people go to take the quiz?
They go to annbennettmarketing.com/archetype quiz.
Archetype quiz. Okay, great. Yeah. We'll make sure that's in the show notes. So people
and that'll give them, you'll get a printout, which pretty much describes you, and then talks about what your presentation style is, what your messaging style is, what your products and programs should sound like, and of course, your Achilles heel.
That's
one thing to avoid.
Wow, that could be, I can imagine that could be really, really helpful. So how do you use that? How do you then take that archetype and turn it into a brand for
that's a great question. I'll try to keep it,
we only have a few minutes here, so I know this is your entire coaching program.
Tiny synopsis of how this works, right? Because that's the tip of the iceberg.
Of course.
Right? Is we get the archetype, and then it's like, okay, so say we're doing you, Steve, and you're a nurturer, well, the way you're dressed today is perfect, right? You got this warm kind of open shirt thing happening. You got plants behind you. That whole feeling that's going on is very nurturing, in how that you are. So then we start to discuss, well, here's something that somebody can use right away. If you want to understand what you should talk about in whatever your field is, your specialty, ask yourself, what breaks my heart and what pisses me off? And you'll get a whole list of things. And inside of those things are going to be really the thread of your life, what you are actually about, what you care about, what's in your heart. All those things will come up to the surface very quickly. So we start with things like that. I do a lot of writing exercises with my clients, and they start to own, honor, and unleash these ideas that maybe have been dormant. I like to say everyone has, the inner rebel that wants to come out and be an outer rock star.
I love it. So I know you develop with your clients something that you call a head whipping hook. Talk about that.
I love your face. It's so great. You're like, head whipping hook. That's exactly what the hook is supposed to do. The hook is something that interrupts. We all have all this noise and all the stuff going on in our head. And if you're out networking, people are thinking about what they're going to say. They're not really thinking about what you're saying.
Not really
Or,
listening. Yeah.
there's a lot, there's so many options and so much going on online. You got, I don't know, 10,000 marketing messages every day in your inbox, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff. How is it that people are going to stop and pay attention to what you have to say? So that's where the head whipping hook comes in. And usually it involves alliteration, because people remember that as children, in all the kids' books, Dr. Seuss and nursery rhymes and all this stuff uses alliteration, and that's how you remember. So the head whipping hook is something like, I had a client who was in the beauty industry, and she had a very horrific story about a car accident where her nose actually was blown off of her face. And then she had it reattached, and she was very beautiful. And I was like, Heidi, I mean, really? You look so perfect. And she's like, yeah, well, this is what happened to me. And that's how I got interested in cosmetic surgery and things like that. And I said, oh, so your hook would be, nobody wants to be stared at unless they're stunning. And she went, oh, yeah. So it's like, you want to start to combine. I teach how to do this. I actually have a class. I teach head whipping hooks. And, when I work with my clients, we just write them, because a lot of times the client actually says what it is, but I hear it. It's like, it's that whole thing about how you can't see your own eyebrows.
Right.
You can't hear what you're saying either. You're just saying it, and you're like, and I take that and connect the dots, pull out your wisdom, the things that you say all the time. Like, Steve, do you have something you say all the time around your business, or a piece of
Sure.
wisdom? Yeah.
Well, I mean, the promise that I make is that I can find $30,000 to $50,000 or more in untapped revenue for any small business in under 45 minutes.
Under 45 minutes?
Under 45 minutes.
Cool. So,
I also have the Profit Minds growth system. It's
which is cool.
Enhancing profits, accelerating productivity, and building business process.
Yeah, it's all about really systems and process, right?
It is.
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing. I'm not, as a disruptor, I would say something like this. Probably you would not say this, Steve, because you're more of a nurturer. As a disruptor, I would say, are you dumb enough to be rich? That would be the hook, because it would interrupt.
Right.
Profit building, beep, beep, bop, systems, which is all great. Don't get me wrong. It's just that it's not going to catch my attention.
Right.
Right. So I'm going to say something that is disruptive. I call it a head whipping hook, because people go, what?
Okay.
They kind of do the
how about this
Scooby-Doo.
one? How about this one? It's not rocket science. So, I mean, that's what I tell my clients all the time, right? What I teach is basic business. It's not rocket science. And trust me, I know, because I can do rocket science.
Yeah. So what's cool is that you are the rocket scientist. So you could say, it doesn't take a rocket scientist. That would be the lead in. And then
it doesn't take a rocket scientist to build a business.
To build a profitable business.
Cool.
Because we think it does. Right? As entrepreneurs, I mean, come on, let's just be real. It's not that easy. But then when they come to you, Steve, you can make it easy, because you have a system, right? That simplifies it and goes, this is where the profits are, just go there. stop spinning around like we all do. And that's great.
Yeah. Don't put yourself into orbit.
Exactly. So I would use all those things with you because you are who you are. Your background is rocket scientist, right? And you're wearing the little round glasses. That's all perfect on brand. And so it's kind of like we might do photographs where we blow that up even bigger to where you really look like, a rocket
Big,
scientist.
yeah, big.
No, you have like the pens in the pocket with the, plastic.
I have one. It's in the other room.
Yeah, right. So we play with that when we're developing out the brand because you are the scientist. So people just overlook these things because they think, oh, that's not really my business, or that's something I used to do, but I don't do it now, kind of thing. But really, it really informs why people want to work with you.
That's great. So how do you make it fun?
Well, I kind of am a fun girl. The more fun I have, the more money I make. That's my one of my signature things. So it's like the fun part comes with the creativity. It's not a one size fits all. It's not like there's all these scientists. Even if I did have a room of you guys together, you would have different points of view of how you did things and how you are. So it's like you can think of it as like there's Madonna, Lady Gaga, Beyonce, and Cher. They're all singers, they're all entertainers, they're all, but they're all very different. Their brands are very different. And the same thing goes for you. But I look at somebody's personal stories a lot. So it's kind of like, what did your parents tell you never to do is always a good place to start. Like, Steve, what did your parents tell you never to do?
Oh, the first thing that popped in my head was don't talk to strangers.
Right. It was dangerous.
Yeah.
Look at you now. You're talking to strangers. So your podcast goes all over the world or globally, right. And you're talking to strangers every day. So that's where we kind of start. We look at that. We look at, what do people come to you for that they always came to you for as a child and probably still do as an adult?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The other thing my mom always asked, is that the loving thing to do?
That's where your nurture side comes in.
Yeah.
Because you're probably, I'm guessing, because we just met, so I'm just guessing that you're fairly pragmatic and things are very logical in how they move forward and happen.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you have this very strong geek part of your scientist part. And so your mom was like on heart, Steve, heart, because you're probably more here in the head, which is great. It's a combination that makes power, right? So yeah, interesting. So we do that.
Cool. Hey, so I know you have a couple of books, and I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about your course that people can sign up for. So tell us about your books. Hot Women Rock Itty Bitty
Word
Book of Words. What? No.
Yeah, itty bitty book of words. It's not that's a compilation of everyone took a word, right? So I had to take Renegade. What was I going to take? So I took Renegade, and
so this is like a compilation, a whole bunch of different like coaches who put together
coaches and service providers. They all pick a word, right? That usually relates to their business, right? Okay. So I took Renegade, and the thing about that, I teach my clients about this all the time. The dictionary was made up, and then we agreed on the definitions, and that's how we use it. So I always say to people, make up whatever you want about whatever word that you like, because renegade is very negative if you look it up in the dictionary. So I rewrote the definition to it. And that's what my word was. So to me, a renegade is somebody who is driven to transform and change the status quo for the better of humanity.
Yeah, because I think every renegade, if you think about it, every renegade is not trying to destroy stuff. They're trying to change things. You're
Mhm.
absolutely right. I mean, it's like, revolutionaries, right? That they're only bad in the view of the establishment.
Right. The status quo doesn't want to move or shift, right? And
Right.
the only way that really happens is when you have the rebels, the renegades, and the revolutionaries who are driven, heart driven, to make a change for people and be leaders and create groups to make a change for all of us for the better.
I
And I
love that.
think, we, like, sometimes I'm out speaking and I'll be speaking about rebels, and people will go, well, I'm not a rebel. And I'm go, is this a room of entrepreneurs? If you
Yeah.
if you were if you were not a rebel, you'd be working in corporate, okay? It's just,
Yeah.
and they'll all go, oh, because we all have these ideas about what we think something means, right? Or what we've been told, oh, that's good or that's bad. In my world, everything is good. There isn't
That's
really a
great.
bad.
So, and I see another book here, right? Laughing Your Way to Loving Yourself.
Oh yeah, that was an
That sounds
interesting
that
little
sounds
book.
fun.
Yeah, it's 12 steps, 7 habits, 4 agreements, and 1 cup of veggie soup for the soul. And it was basically my response to the 12 steps of Al Anon and Alcoholics Anonymous, and all these different self-help books that
Right.
I have on my bookshelf and that I study, and everyone else does too. And ultimately, it's very irreverent. And we
I can't
rewrite.
imagine that you wrote
I
an
know, how did
irreverent
that
book.
happen?
Really?
My father, he must have had fun raising me. My dad was a high school principal, so he had a
Oh,
few
goodness.
rules and regulations. But
Ah,
I was totally out of control in that way. But yeah, so we rewrote everything and then put a little bit of wisdom and fun into it, because I believe as entrepreneurs that we're so busy being serious about what we care about in our services and what we're doing, which is great, but you got to laugh. You got to laugh at yourself and go, you know what, everything falls apart as it's falling together. You just got to start to think about things and frame them in a very different way. So that
yeah,
book helps people do that.
great. And tell us real quickly about your course.
My Rebel Brand Formula is a
Yeah,
amazing 6-week course where you will learn how to write captivating introductions and introduce yourself and understand how your brand works. But a lot of it has to do with verbally. How do I speak about myself and have people lean in instead of lean out? And it's fabulous. People get tons out of it. um, I just finished a course. I do them once or twice a year. The next one won't be out until October, but people can, it's all recorded. So if people wanted to start the course, they could do that and then come to the live later on. I do laser coaching. We do breakout rooms. It's kind of innovative in that way.
great, great. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Um, Join me on Facebook, Ann Bennett Marketing. I love,
Okay,
DM me. You could also, my email is Ann at Ann Bennett Marketing. So they can reach out
great,
that way.
wonderful. And that concludes our show. Thanks to our guest, Ann Bennett of Ann Bennett Marketing. I hope you've learned something about the power of being a renegade and how to stand out from the crowd. I know I did. This is Dr. Stephen Kirch of Profit Minds. Make sure you catch us again next time on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Of course, I'd appreciate a good review on any of those platforms. Thanks again for joining us.